The Baltimore Ravens officially hired Todd Monken as their next offensive coordinator. We talk about the move, what it means for the Ravens, what it means for Lamar Jackson, getting into a bit of Todd Monken's history, and so much more coming up on this instant reaction live episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another episode of Locked On Ravens live edition. This time, I'm your host, Kevin Ostrecker. Ravens Wire, we are your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, and we're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for being here with us today, making us your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms, including over on YouTube. And today's live episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on today to get started. And we have big news today. It's the reason why we're going live here today on the channel. We did an episode earlier, obviously our regular scheduled Tuesday episode coming out about the Ravens' path to the Super Bowl. But now the Ravens officially hiring Todd Monken as their next offensive coordinator. And for the Ravens, this is, I think, a huge hire. We'll get into all of that here today on the show. And there's a lot to like about it. So we'll talk about Todd Monken a bit, just the history behind him, where he comes from, and what his NFL experience, his college experience has been like, what it means for the Ravens, Lamar Jackson, and so much more here today. If you're here with us live, you can tune in the comments. You can chat in the comments if you want. I'll be looking through them. This is more of a interactive show where I'll go through the comments and read off any thoughts anybody has about the hire and anything else relating to the Ravens. So if you do enjoy the content here, be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube, follow along in audio form as well. We're available anywhere you get your podcasts. So let's talk a bit about Todd Monken here. So the Ravens announcing this right around 10:50. I had a radio spot at 11. I had to quickly get into the Todd Monken zone as I talked with Bob and Vinny on Vinny and Haney about the move. But Monken comes from Georgia, back-to-back national champion at Georgia. Obviously won with Stetson Bennett there, and has had an extensive history of coaching. Now, his NFL experience is offensive coordinator-wise, at least. Tampa Bay, 3 years there from 2016 to 2018. And in 2019, you have the Browns in that offense. Now, worked with Jameis Winston, worked with Baker Mayfield. That was Baker Mayfield's first year starting. And something that immediately pops out to me here, and there were multiple things, but something that pops out is the fact that each year Todd Monken was an NFL offensive coordinator, there was at least one 1,000-yard receiver. In 2016, it was Mike Evans. In 2017, it was Mike Evans. In 2018, Mike Evans. And then 2019 in Cleveland, it was both Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. Now, for the Ravens, their 1,000-yard receiver track record, it's been a little spotty over the years. Mike Wallace did in 2016, and I know it slips people's mind. It slipped mine for a second today that Marquise Brown had an 1,000-yard season in 2021. But for the Ravens, it's about how do you utilize your guys? How do you utilize your personnel? I think for Todd Monken, there's a lot to like about this. So the Ravens' official statement on the move and what they had to say, what John Harbaugh had to say, said, quote, "We conducted 21 interviews with 14 candidates throughout a thorough process that had wide-ranging organizations' involvement. Todd's leadership and coaching acumen were evident from the beginning. He has a proven track record for designing and teaching offensive systems that allow players to succeed at the highest level. We're excited to get to work and begin building an offense that will help us compete for championships." And so this kind of peeled the curtain back a little bit on what the Ravens search was like, at least what they're putting out there. 14 candidates, 21 interviews. And it felt more than that to me. Like, maybe it's just me, but it felt like since it dragged on for so long, like I thought this maybe would have happened last week where they got someone, but it felt like a pretty long, extensive search. Now, for Todd Monken in general, you look at the personnel, you look at we'll talk about his stats first of all. So the Georgia offense in 2022, obviously national championship year for them, they demolished TCU. Put up 41.1 points per game. That was tied with Alabama for fourth in all of college football. Then you look at total offense yards-wise. They were fifth in all of college football, over 500 yards per game, 501.1. So this is exciting because, look, you have Lamar Jackson putting up 41 points per game. you're winning the Super Bowl. Now, is that going to happen at the NFL level? Probably not. Probably not putting up 41 points per game. But it goes to show the consistency there that Todd Monken and this Georgia offense had. Now, it's interesting because we'll look at his NFL splits now. First of all, Tampa Bay, we'll start first year there, offensive coordinator wise, 2016, ranked 26th in passing with 18th in passing with 6.4 net yards per attempt, and 29th in rushing, 3.6 yards per attempt. Then you go to 2017, the Tampa offense actually took a huge step in pass offense. They were 10th in the NFL with net yards per attempt at 6.8, and then they were actually 27th in the league, so took a bit of a step back rushing wise, 3.7. Then his final year in 2018, Tampa, again, they were good in the pass department. They, again, took a step up, 7.7 net yards per attempt. That was good for second. They were the second best passing offense in the NFL, but the 31st best, so second worst rushing team at 3.9. So every year the pass offense got better in Tampa Bay, but the rush offense got worse. Now, fast forward to 2019, he takes over Cleveland's offense. The Browns were 17th in passing and 4th in rushing. So to me, this shows, and a lot of people have already talked about this, the balance that Todd Monken brings, where he can adapt to his personnel, where we didn't see it enough. We did not see that enough from Greg Roman and his offense, where we saw, look, 2019, historic offense. We all know it. We all understand it. Historic rushing. They were a top 10 passing unit that year or two, but the growth just kind of stopped, or it became very, very slow. Where with Todd Monken, we see him adapt to the personnel. And so for Baltimore, John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta talked about it during the end of season press conference, where they want to keep some of the stuff they did on offense. They don't want to tear this offense down and start from scratch. And John Harbaugh even talked about keeping some of those pass concepts. But Monken coming in is going to add innovative ideas, fresh ideas. I'm very glad they went external in the situation. An internal candidate wouldn't have been the end of the world, but I think it would have been very telling about the Lamar situation if it was internal, about how do these external guys view the Lamar situation. And even in the comments, Felix is saying, is it a good or a bad sign? Did Lamar have any say so? I think, one, this is a good sign, and two, for Lamar, Josina Anderson reported that Lamar and even key players were allowed to have input in the situation, which I personally think is a good sign. I mean, I think for the Ravens, that was the right thing to do, first of all. And there's a lot to be said about an organization kind of taking the input of their players. I think it speaks to the culture the Ravens have. I think that's a very good sign. Joseph saying Todd hasn't coached a true dual threat in several years, as Jameis Baker and Stenson Bennett are his recent quarterbacks. Thoughts on him being able to utilize a mobile quarterback. And this is a point. Even so, we saw the Georgia offense last year, and Baker's not like this mobile. You don't look at Baker Mayfield and say he's a mobile guy. Even Jameis Winston, there are interesting points to be made about what is the potential of Todd Monken with a mobile quarterback. But we saw the Georgia offense utilize quarterback draws and quarterback runs a little bit throughout the course of the season, especially in 2022. So I think it's a good thing. And for Monken, one of the things that he does well is he keeps a defense on their toes. He's not someone that's easy to predict. An article from The Athletic kind of outlined this a little bit, where Monken kind of goes away from the grain a little bit. He kind of does things differently and in a good way. So the article here, on snaps with 8+ defenders in the box. So when you have guys stacked in the box, that's indicative of a running situation. Monken, an offensive coordinator the past 2 years at Georgia, dropped back to pass in those situations 30.2% of the time, and then also 21.9% of the time. Then on snaps with 6 or fewer defenders in the box, so that indicates passing, Georgia called a designed run 38.5% of the time and at 36.6% of the time. So part of that also has to do with execution. You have to have both play calling and execution. Some of the play calls that Greg Roman put out there on 3rd and 1, like, I'm fine throwing the football on a 3rd and 1, but the play call has to be there. Like, you can't have a terrible play call and then guys aren't open and you have to throw the ball away. Even on 4th downs, the 4th down execution, the red zone execution is something we've been talking about here on Locked On Ravens forever. So that's something that has to improve. I think Monken can do that for them. But a key point in this whole situation is also the fact that Monken, we'll look at a bit of personnel usage. Cole Jackson, friend of the show, he was a zone-heavy guy at Georgia, and in 2022, Cole put out the stats: 159 inside zones, 90 outside zones, 74 counter, 29 duo, 9 power. So very versatile in terms of the zone schemes. And a zone scheme offense. If you go back to 2014 and that Gary Kubiak offense, that was a zone running team. Blockers pulling and doing everything, getting into their spaces, being able to neutralize guys. That offense was incredible. I mean, that 2014 Gary Kubiak offense was one of my favorite offenses. So I'm on board with this hire. I know there were a lot of people on the Eric Bieniemy train, myself included, also Brian Johnson, myself included. I mean, my top three were Bieniemy, Johnson, and Monken. For Bieniemy, I don't really know what the deal is there. I've been saying he's much deserving of a head coaching opportunity, much less than another offensive coordinator opportunity, but just didn't work out. I guess I know Bieniemy's still in the running for Washington, potentially Arizona. For Brian Johnson, I felt like Brian Johnson was someone the Ravens really wanted. Obviously, there's nothing been confirmed on that, but it just felt like Brian Johnson was a Ravens guy. But then the Shane Steichen hire in Indianapolis kind of threw a wrench in that, with Johnson likely becoming the offensive coordinator now in Philadelphia. So I think Monken's a good hire here. I mean, there were a lot of ways this could have gone in terms of whether Baltimore wanted pure play calling experience. Did they want to have someone go build into that role as someone who didn't have that, was more of a young up and coming mind? But Monken still is a bright football mind, and I think his philosophies will do wonders for this organization in terms of some of the stuff that Todd Monken said. And I know Garnett West, who shares a bunch of great stuff, shared a video, a mashup of stuff that Todd Monken said during his time in Cleveland, and some of the quotes: being able to throw to win. It's all about having good players. Space players is how you become explosive. Balance, having enough skill players, matchups to hurt defenses. It's all those kinds of things that will help this team out, because we just saw too much stagnation, too much stagnant activities from this Ravens offense over the course of the last 3 seasons, where you're expecting, or you would at least like, consistent growth from this organization, especially offensively, especially with the Lamar Jackson-led offense. But there just wasn't enough of that. I don't think Greg Roman used his personnel well enough. And it's stuff I've said all this before, where it just felt like the marriage between the Ravens and Greg Roman was just too stale to continue. I think the Ravens made the right decision in moving on. I think the Ravens made the right decision here, at least one they could make here, in hiring Todd Monken. But coming up, still a lot to dive into on Locked On Ravens. We're going to continue talking about Todd Monken, personnel, groupings, everything, especially what it means for Lamar Jackson, too, as that is the next big note to fall. So stay tuned, still a lot to dive into on Locked On Ravens. But first, this episode of Locked On Ravens is sponsored by BetterHelp. And when you're at your best, you can do great things, but sometimes life gets you bogged down. You may feel overwhelmed or like you're not showing up in the way that you want to. Working with a therapist can help you get closer to the best version of you, because when you feel empowered, you're more prepared to take on everything life throws you, no matter how big or how small. And there are plenty of people who have benefited from therapy, and therapy can help you a ton in terms of a ton of broader benefits, such as learning positive coping skills, how to set boundaries. It empowers you to become the best version of yourself. And it isn't just for those who have experienced major trauma. There are tons of types of therapy out there that help many, many people. So if you're thinking of giving therapy a try BetterHelp. It's a great option. It's convenient, flexible, affordable, and entirely online. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. If you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. We're back here, our second segment of Locked On Ravens, here, live edition. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on the show today. Todd Monken, the hire for the Ravens, their next offensive coordinator, replacing Greg Roman. That marriage being 4 seasons. Who knows how long this marriage is going to be? Some Valentine's Day news, a Valentine's Day present out there for all the Ravens fans. We got palm trees going on. I get the palm tree shirt for me comes out on special occasions. I got the palm tree in the background. We're double palm treed up here today on the show. If you do like the content here, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Also, be sure to follow along in audio form as well. This live version will be out in audio form directly after the live stream ends. So if you want to listen to it again or view it, it will be there for you. But for Todd Monken, again, a hire that I'm impressed. I'm impressed with it. I mean, I know he's not the biggest name. I mean, I think when you're talking about who was the biggest name in the search, Eric Bieniemy probably takes that cake, because he's definitely high profile, someone who deserves that opportunity. He deserves an opportunity. I will continue to say that he deserves an opportunity. And I don't know what's going on with him in terms of why he hasn't gotten that opportunity. But for Baltimore, I think Todd Monken fits what they want to do now. And I think what the Ravens were looking for was someone who does have that adaptability. It's been put out there a lot over the course of the last couple of hours here since the hiring became official, how adaptable Todd Monken is to personnel. If you have good running personnel, he'll be able to use it well. Good air raid personnel will be able to do that. Now, Monken does have that air raid aspect to him. And in the hire of Monken, you are getting someone who brings the air raid background to you. And I think that's something a lot of people wanted in Baltimore. If Lamar Jackson comes back, being able to utilize his arm talents to their full ability, but also he has the success with heavy personnel. Jonas Schaefer, the Baltimore Sun, putting out that Georgia's offense is ranked second in efficiency in each of the past 2 seasons. And that's what you want. You want efficiency in an offense where you want to be able to score the football. And part of the reason why the 2019 offense was so successful is because Lamar Jackson's touchdown percentage was I think it was 10 that year. I think it was second best ever in NFL history. I think only behind Peyton Manning. So you want to have offensive efficiency, and the fact where we just got so used to, I feel like in Baltimore over the past couple of seasons, stale, stagnant stuff, which that's a word I'm going to continue to use, especially when I'm talking about Greg Roman, because it just felt like punt, 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 and then in the red zone, field goal, field goal, field goal. You have to be able to scheme guys open for the entirety of the game, whether you're at your own one or the opponent's one. And for Baltimore, it felt like they weren't doing it enough. And now you have a guy in Todd Monken who has success in the red zone. The Georgia offense, very efficient, as we just mentioned, over the course of these last couple of seasons. It's a hire that I think will pay many dividends. And in terms of the adaptability, Jonas Schaefer also put out a really great stat. You don't want to pigeonhole him into any one kind of system, any one kind of scheme. In terms of actual looks, 11 personnel looks, Tampa Bay 2016, they ran that 58.9% of the time. And just for those who don't know, 11 personnel is one running back, one tight end, and 3 wide receivers at the same time. So 2016, 58.9%. 2017, 61.2%. 2018, 68.9%. Then at Georgia, 2020, 62.7%. So that's all around the same number. 2021, that dropped to 45.3%. 2022 dropped even further to 35.9%. 2021 and 2022 is when Georgia won their national championship. So it's big. Adaptability is big. And part of that is because it just felt like in the Greg Roman days, there was no adaptability, where a play call on a 3rd and 1 was just so out of touch. I mean, there are plenty of out of touch plays that I could go back to and look at. But the James Prochet throw, like the double reverse James Prochet throw against Jacksonville when the Ravens had momentum on that drive, they were running the football well. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Greg Roman uncorks that vault, unlocks it, and decides to risk it all. And it was just an epic, epic failure. So, and also something I'm excited for personally is hopefully no more play calling issues, but also play clock issues where everybody knows the drill. The play clock, they get out of the huddle like 8 seconds, and then it was 5, 4, 3, 2. They're burning timeouts, they're getting delay game penalties. And that's something in Greg Roman's tenure that went back to his days in San Francisco, in Buffalo. I'm hoping Todd Monken is not like that, because I would like to see an offense that's just it feels a bit more under control. It felt like the Ravens were rushing too much at times with their offense throughout the course of the last couple of seasons with Greg Roman. It was something that, was addressed and was never fixed, where we heard it. And eventually John Harbaugh said, yeah, we have to be better in that aspect. And it got fixed for a little bit. But then I'm still haunted by that game execution against Cincinnati, where, I think the fault there falls both on John Harbaugh and Greg Roman. And the time management mostly probably falls on John Harbaugh in that situation. But you just have to be better. There's an execution standpoint from a player perspective and an execution point from a coach perspective. The coach execution offensively was just not good enough. So for Monken, this is an opportunity for him too. And Monken has said, you see, there was an article. It's Jake Luke put out the quote, and I know it's probably been surfacing over the course of the last couple hours, but he said, Monken says, quote, "It's fair in that I do like to throw. I'm paid to score. I'm not paid to win. I'm paid to aid support of that, but I'm also paid to be responsible for winning. And so the explosiveness, I think we're going to see a lot more deep shots. We're going to see screen passes. I hope screen passes, right? The Ravens, it is unheard of. It is absolutely unheard of for the Ravens to run a screen pass over the last couple of seasons. Whenever they ran a screen pass, everyone was like, oh my God, a screen pass. Like, this is unbelievable. It's happening. But I think now Monken's philosophies and part of it. You talked a bit about the running game a little bit because he did say he likes to the football, but there is a running aspect to his game. For Monken, he mentioned how for him and for a lot of people, this is for me as well, the run game and the pass game can be kind of married together, where the short passing game is an extension of the run game. And I agree with that because dink and dunk plays actually have really good chances to pick up chunk yards, especially if you can get blockers out in front. Now, the Ravens' bread and butter is the run game. You know, that hasn't changed since this Monken hiring. Obviously, personnel, we'll talk a bit about personnel in the final segment a little bit, but there's just a lot of stuff going on where you can talk about how much are they going to have to utilize a Patrick Ricard, how they're going to utilize Isaiah Likely. These are all questions that we're going to probably get answers to over the course of these next couple of months. But a lot of this also is for Lamar Jackson. Hopefully, again, there's nothing confirmed yet about Lamar, but Braden Howard saying, hearing that LJ and other key players on the offense had a say in the hire makes me feel good going forward, especially with the Josina Anderson tweet. I feel good about the LJ signing. And yeah, I mean, it's a good sign, especially as your key guys, and I talked about it a bit in the first segment. When you have your key players, and obviously there's still questions to figure out about Lamar and just what the whole situation is, franchise tag, extension, trade. But I have a feeling Lamar's probably happy with this. And part of the issue with what the Ravens offense was just frustrated. It just felt like people, especially players, were frustrated with what was going on. And it just felt like the vibe was off almost. I mean, Monken is a respected coach, and Josina Anderson saying Todd Monken is well respected. My understanding is Monken had strong interest from Tampa Bay, and Georgia was also applying pressure for a decision. I mean, this is a guy who was wanted. I mean, he likely would have gone to Tampa Bay again and gone there again if it wasn't for Baltimore. Baltimore's offensive coordinator position was apparently an attractive one, and that doesn't surprise me. I've been saying that Ravens offense coordinator position was the strongest in the situation, but for Baltimore, being able to have Lamar's input from both a philosophical and schematic standpoint, as Justina Anderson said, there are multiple aspects to it. I think for Lamar, it's going to be great at the end of returning to the team. And another quote that Monken had, and Spencer Schultz, friend of the show, put this out. We recorded yesterday for today's show. So if you haven't checked out today's Tuesday episode, we talk about the Ravens at the Super Bowl. But Todd Monken talked about winning, and of course, it's the fact that he's getting paid a lot of money. And Monken earned $2 million at Georgia. Like, he got paid, and he said, "quote You have to be careful. The grass isn't always greener, and money isn't everything. Now, I value getting paid. Don't get me wrong. I don't do this for nothing. But the reality is, you have to be careful because your happiness is winning. It's about winning. It's the fight song in the locker room. That's what it's about. Anybody that says, "Hey, I'm a and boy, this is great. I love it. It's great for my family, and we're 4-8. I'm happy." That's not me. I'd rather be winning in Alaska than losing in San Diego. So Monken is a guy who feels like he's about winning. And as we saw, and as I talked about, and as Truth Bearer says, he says the silver lining is that in the Bucs had an above average passing game. Concern was overall they had a below average scoring offenses. That is true. I talked about it, how Baltimore, for them, they're getting a guy in the Monken whose Tampa Bay offenses literally improved passing every single season. It was the rushing offenses, and Tampa never had a great rush offense, and they haven't had great rushing offenses. And Truth Bearer also says, have they not even interviewed Bieniemy? Again, the Bieniemy situation is one that baffles me, not just for Baltimore, but for the entire league in terms of how he hasn't gotten a job. I think he's deserving. I mean, he's been the architect or one of the architects of one of the best offenses we've seen. 2 Super Bowl championships, 5 straight AFC championship games hosted in Baltimore. I still think Monken is a good hire. I mean, that's my stance on it. And, Joseph also popping in here in the chat saying, can we confirm Monken has never called a quarterback sneaking 3-yard line? I'm hoping. I'll have to go through the tape and look, but obviously, the quarterback sneaking that situation and the execution of that still haunts people a lot to this day. But we still have a lot to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. Coming up, we'll be diving into more Monken conversation, more Monken content, because the Ravens now have their guy. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a lot to dive into here on Locked On Ravens. But first, This episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Built Bar. And if you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories, you have to try a Built Bar. And we just got through the holidays, and I know for me, my goal is to eat a little healthier this year with my New Year's resolution. Now we're a month and some change past the New Year's resolution. But if you want to eat a bit healthier, you have to try Built. Built is healthy and actually tasty. And what makes Built Bar so good is for starters, they're covered in 100% real chocolate, and they come with unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. They only have 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. Now you don't even have to worry about getting a box. We've been talking about ordering your Built Bars at Built.com, and I can get them to your local Walmart or even a Sam's Club. You can head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. If it goes to a Sam's Club, run and grab a 13-bar box with hit flavors such as brownie batter and churro. Grab yourself a Built Bar today. You can thank me. We are back here, our final segment of Locked On Ravens, Todd Monken edition, live edition. Kevin Oestreicher is still here with you today. We have the chat going on in the YouTube comments right now. Charles Henshaw saying, I hope they use Lamar like the Eagles use Hurts. I'm very interested to see what they do with Lamar, especially if he has to come back first. That's the next domino to fall. But the big domino today, at least on Valentine's Day, of another Valentine's Day present, being Todd Monken to the Ravens. And it's a shift. It's a definite shift for the Ravens. Mark here saying, I like it. Flexible guy who can marry, run, and pass. Fans of every team where he has been offensive coordinator like him, and the Bucs tried to get him back. And exactly, flexibility is the key part in all of this in terms of what you want now. Because for the Ravens, their window is really interesting. And in terms of actual personnel, what they have right now, what this means moving forward for that, obviously Lamar is a lot of that. What do you do with Lamar versus what you do without Lamar, money-wise, personnel-wise. But I think Todd Monken can help Lamar out in a lot of ways, even if it is just putting him in better situations and putting his skill position players in better situations. We know what the Ravens are as a ground team. We know they're very solid. But give this Ravens offense a balanced attack. Give this Ravens offense a good rushing offense and a good passing offense. And look, I'm not even saying give them like a top 10 off pass offense. You can give them the 12th best pass offense. You can give them the 11th best pass offense. If you still have a top 5 rushing offense paired with that top 12 passing offense, I think you're going places. And what the Ravens now have a decision to make on is what does this mean wide receiver wise for them? I think it means that the Ravens hopefully will go out there, and as we've talked about before, we talked about it on even today's episode of the show that came out at around 6. Baltimore needs wide receivers. They need them. I think their philosophy over these past couple of seasons, they did not fully maximize Lamar on his rookie contract, compared to what Buffalo did, compared to what Arizona did, and Cincinnati and Philadelphia and Kansas City, all these teams. Now you have an opportunity. If you extend Lamar, there's an opportunity. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but there's an opportunity for Lamar to make less than he made this past year in the first couple of years of that deal. Because Lamar on the 5th-year option made right around $22 million. That was his cap hit. But for the Ravens, if you extend Lamar, and depending on obviously total money and guarantees and everything that's been talked about for a while here, the Ravens could potentially have Lamar on a first-year cap hit of a backloaded deal. Maybe it's $10 million. Maybe your second-year cap hit is $15 million. You can still utilize that. That can allow you to go out there and get a DeAndre Hopkins for Todd Monken and Lamar Jackson. That can allow you to go out there. If you want to sign 2 number 2 guys like the Chiefs did, because I think it depends how you value Juju and Marquez Valdes-Scantling, but if you sign a Jacoby Myers and a DJ Chark, I know that would be exciting for a lot of people, but again, you now have the opportunity to build this offense and build it in a way that isn't so can hold. That's the word that Jonas Shaffer used, and I agree with that. But I think at the end of the day, you don't want to build a personnel just for one side of the ball and then kind of go all in there and not have enough. And then the personnel dictates that, and then you can't call quality plays too. And it was just so many things went wrong for the Ravens in that final month of the season, 2 months of the season, and then even dating back to last year, even 2 years ago, where I think for me, the first questions of what Greg Roman brought to the table was, I guess, soft questions. Where after the 2019 season, where the Ravens clearly established themselves, as a run-first team, which is fine. I know that the league is shifting towards throwing the football, air raid offenses, airing the ball out. The Ravens had a historic offense in 2019. Even coming off of that in 2020, the Ravens were struggling to find an identity over the course of the first 2 months of the season. And I'm kind of thinking to myself, how are you struggling to find an identity and struggling to kind of know who you are when we know what you are? Like, everybody knows it. It felt like they were the only ones who didn't know it. And they finally get back to their identity in the last couple months of the season, and they just run teams off of the field, especially in that last month of the season. So with Monken, he's someone who brings you versatility. He's someone who, if you want to run the ball effectively, he can do that. You want to improve your passing game, he can do that. So for me, this hire kind of encapsulates the Ravens being able to keep what was good from the Greg Roman tenure, keep what was good from their past couple of years of this offense, because there was good. There was good in that. But Munkin can come in and, again, shift and change philosophies, shift and improve the passing offense, and be able to give them creative and innovative ideas from the aspects that they need those in. So it's an exciting day, I feel like. I know, again, I know Bieniemy was a lot of people's pick, and he was my top choice too, but I think there were 3 kind of perfect guys for this role. It was Bieniemy, Brian Johnson, and Todd Monken. Those are my top 3. So I do think this is a very good fit the Ravens want to do on offense now. They have to be able to execute it. They have to be able to get into their groove and figure out. I mean, one thing I'm excited about is Isaiah Likely. What does this mean for Isaiah Likely? We saw what Isaiah Likely can do, especially when he was the guy when Mark Andrews had to miss some time. Likely's a guy who I think the Ravens mismanaged, mishandled his usage last season. He's a guy that I think deserves plenty of opportunities and deserves a big role in this offense, whether it is an inline guy, is an outside guy, slot guy. Put him on the field and let him work. And again, it Todd Monken has talked about, and some of the quotes I've read out here, the thing that he values is having good players. And when you have the good players, it's the coach's job to be able to put them in positions to succeed. Monken's able to do that, and he's been able to do that over the course of his tenure, both at the NFL level and at the college level, where it's interesting. I kind of talked about the trajectory of the hire, what the Ravens wanted in the next offensive coordinator, because their timeline is interesting and a lot of it hinges on Lamar Jackson. They have a great defense right now, and that's part of what made Monken's offense so successful with Georgia. Is Georgia has a heck of a defense over there. You know, we saw how many draft picks over these past 3 years or so, 2 years or so from that Georgia defense. Monken's offense took the strengths of that defense and utilized it on offense, where they were able to maximize because they played off of their defense. The offense played off of the defense, and the defense played off of the offense. It all goes hand in hand. So trajectory-wise, you have Roquan Smith, you have Marlon Humphrey, you have hopefully a Calais Campbell coming back, Marcus Williams, Kyle Hamilton. These are all guys who can help you out a ton. And Truth Bearer says the UGA offense definitely used multiple tight ends. So I see how this could work out for Likely and Kohler. And it's exactly that. I'm interested to see Josh Oliver's market and what he commands, because I think if he is cheap enough, Baltimore can bring him back. I think if he gets a deal that Baltimore's not comfortable matching because they have Andrews, Kohler, Likely, I see him walking. But Oliver was good for them. So they multiple tight end sets, but they can also use 11 personnel if they really want to. Because, again, we've seen Todd Monken offenses in that 11 personnel with 3 wide receivers on the field, where they utilize it almost 2/3 of the time. Then you see it some of the last couple of seasons where they utilize it only around like 35, 42% of the time. So the adaptability, the flexibility, it just felt like so many times with the Ravens and Greg Roman, you almost knew it was coming, or it wasn't good enough because you wanted them to do one thing, and it was pretty obvious what they should do, and then they didn't do it. They never did it the way that it was expected to happen and that it should have happened, and that, I think, held the offense back in multiple different ways. So for Monken, someone who, again, fits the timeline because there were questions for, guys like Dave Canales and Brian Angelicchio and some of these other guys who hadn't had play calling experience at the NFL level. Does that fit what the Ravens want to do? It definitely felt like Baltimore wanted a more established option. Monken is definitely that. So they get a guy who I think provides plenty, both run-wise and pass-wise, but it's going to be a nice shot in the arm for Baltimore in terms of what they can do offensively, and I'm excited to see how it all plays out for them. But that's all I have for you here today on this live edition of Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much, everybody, tuning in live here. Again, if you want to watch this again or listen to it, it'll be out in audio form right after this is up. When we get back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens, it's more Todd Monken content. Be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube here. Follow along in audio form. We are 5 days a week here on Locked On Ravens, even in the offseason. So plenty of Todd Monken content coming up. Again, thank you everybody for tuning into the live show. And we will see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.